Welcome back, everyone. John, your organization is pursuing a mix of solutions that could involve safe outdoor spaces. What are some of the ideas, and how is the city receiving them?
Yeah, so first, I'm a community member and a neighbor. I live right off of Central Avenue and work right off of Central Avenue in the International District. So I look at this from a community standpoint first. And so kind of in that base of development over 25 years of urban farm and, tutoring kids, 16 years ago, we started a housing cooperative. We just started talking to neighbors about ownership and the fact that our neighborhood has up to like 85% rental. We were seeing people come and go and move around, and it was hard to hold the depth of people staying because there wasn't ownership. But people couldn't get a loan. In fact, our organization couldn't get a bank loan. So we identified a property that had six buildings, 21 bedroom apartments, and 2 houses. And we got private investors to give us low interest loans. And we ended up buying it in 2008. The day we bought it, several families moved in because they were unhoused at the time. And the down payment was very low and sweat equity. And so we kind of hybrid a cooperative out of that. 16, 17 years later, families are, the ones that are still from the original are up to like $20,000 in equity with very low monthly payments. So we've been trying to find community-based solutions for a long time. Right now, as our organization kind of readjusted last year to really focus more on this issue because it's chronic in the International District. But we see it as this is our community. How can we look at simple or local solutions? None of it's simple, but local solutions to keep our neighbors and not displace them, but really support them. So identifying over 300 vacant lots, and we've really kind of focused in on how can we acquire vacant lots with private money and also capital outlay money, which we were fairly successful this last legislative session. $3.5 million for that, and then out of that, and that's going to the county we've been identifying the lots that are starting to be purchased. And then we're also starting a new community land trust. So a group of neighbors are meeting every single week. Kind of 13 have committed to that weekly, but there's 25, 50, in kind of advisory roles to this. And just going through the slow process of what are the values of a community land trust and how could community ownership and stewardship of land with kind of new ideas of more small incremental development of housing start working with putting people in to safe shelters that have locked doors and a place to rest.
So sort of like pallet shelters or tiny homes or
all
maybe
the above.
Okay.
We're talking about a continuum of housing from being completely unsheltered to home ownership, but there are big missing gaps in the system. And a lot of money in our system is getting poured into affordable rental, a lot of tax credit money. And I'd say we need more of all of it, but we have to fill some of these gaps that are too much to bridge for people, like tiny homes, like smaller incremental shelters, and then also maybe cooperatives that can go from rental to home ownership.
And Jenny, your organization focuses on meeting healthcare needs for people who are unhoused or precariously housed. First, what are their needs? And second, what can be done in the next year to address them?
So we think in terms of, from a public health systems model, very episodic basic needs. And I hope there's a theme here. We're always trying not to get into either ors because it has to be yes. Reality happens in the center, in the dialectic, where everything's interacting. But so we address healthcare needs broadly defined, exclusively for people experiencing homelessness broadly defined. So not the HUD definition only, but people who are couch surfing or doubled up or tripled up in the International District. And we do all the basic healthcare needs that include medical, dental, art therapy, prevention, pharmacy, extensive social services, housing navigation, case management, helping people with IDs, just really, really basic. And we can do that anywhere in the county. But we also know that we will never be big enough, so we have to collaborate extensively. And we're always looking at exiting to housing. There was a time where we've done really well, both the city, the county, and the state, in adding housing resources in the form of vouchers and also some development opportunities. But right now, we've been stalled with the market after the pandemic with landlords and their willingness to take vouchers or not. And there are some very real administrative burdens for them that we have to acknowledge. How we get back to working together. Pre-pandemic, we could get someone housed from the streets with a voucher in about 2 weeks with that wraparound support. So I'm not going to let go of that possibility.
That's not
and
happening
that
now.
we can do that. It's not happening now. But I think addressing those basic needs, but never losing that collaborative systems. What we want are housed people with access to health care, a decent income, whether those are wages or benefits to which they're entitled for disabilities, and that we're all collaborating together and holding the system and the community accountable to not letting our neighbors be out there with what we all see every single day. So I think the services, I think the collaboration, I think leadership and a big plan that holds us together toward impact is
Okay.
really important.
Can I?
Where you come in, Damon?
Yeah. So I'm thinking about it as I'm listening to them, and I'm thinking, what am I really trying to do here? I'm trying to make their life easier. Because from a political perspective, right? So I'm a former legislator. What I know as a politician is that if the public thinks you're moving in the right direction, they're going to be much more accepting of new and innovative approaches. They will expand. I think ultimately people are empathetic, but they want to be on the side of success. As long as we're here and moving, not because of these guys, but just because there hasn't been this structure that the public perceives we're moving in the wrong direction. And they're not wrong about that, because the homeless population is growing in Albuquerque, and significantly. If we can start to turn the corner, and I keep saying this to people, we're on the front page of the New York Times, that we're leading the nation, I do think the public will be much more accepting of new and innovative ideas that'll really move the envelope, and they'll start to look at the homeless much differently as people we can help, as our neighbors who fell on hard times. We have a problem, right? And I've said this, the statistics are homeless have a 30-year less life expectancy than the rest of us. And 1 out of every 4 days, one of them dies. So it's a problem.
Definitely. And I do want to ask you, Damon, you write in your report, you have there, in order to build support, motivation, and connection between the goals and the community at large, we should be encouraging the homeless population to get off the streets, provide a safe environment where they can go, and then provide the public with an accurate picture of who in our community is homeless. So I have to ask if these potential solutions you're proposing are focused on showing the public that something is being done, or focused on solutions that will get unhoused people what they need to be safe and secure?
It's both.
It's both.
It's both. It really is. If we can focus on solutions, then and have a structure to help them, these people do a good job with homeless and get people off the streets where they are dying. I mean, that's just the reality. Then the public, I think, will be much more accepting of even more innovative and aggressive approaches. And there's all these myths about, well, people want to be on the streets, and that's just not true. We need to identify the homeless population. I put that in there as well. We can do that so that we know who these people are, what their problems are, what their conditions are. We don't have to let the public know that by name, but we should be much more detailed about what's going on.
John, I see you leaning in. So
Yeah. And what their assets are, what their gifts are, what their hopes are, what their dreams are. We've been working with a small encampment, small, 50 people, and you start talking to people, and several of them would love to build because they're builders. And we start talking about, if we have a trailer and some material, they would love to build their own tiny home. Their eyes light up. So getting people participating at all different levels, I think part of our issue is it's such a large issue, everyone feels kind of paralyzed. So we look to the city to solve it, or all the nonprofits, or why isn't it being solved? And if we can break it down, and so people volunteer and they give, and that's great. But if we can break the big problem down into bite-sized pieces, that's where like small vacant lots, hey, a church raised money to buy a vacant lot, and the donors gave to that vacant lot. And then a group came together and participated in building a shed as a prototype. So if we can get more people involved and engaged, but look at it as assets as well, and how do we start moving towards, how do we work together at this from all different levels? But the people on the streets have hopes, dreams, skills. How do we utilize their creativity and resilience to survive for purpose?
I love you want a shift in the conversation, a shift in the outlook.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't want to just talk about we need more money. We do. We need more of all of it. But I want to shift the conversation about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jenny, I see you.
So this is back to the dichotomies and the dialectic, like the solution, the tasty solutions are in the guts in the middle. And yes to everything you said, and that will not end homelessness. It's important to include the people for who experience everything we're talking about. And I do agree, homelessness is where the nexus of every social, economic, traumatic ill come together. But if we don't address the structures and the root causes that create it, and I think that our organization talks about this a lot, there is a public and private, community, national good of the common accountability to this. We make policy and resource allocation decisions at so many levels. As a country, as a community, that creates these conditions, and that's how we can end that. It has to be an essential part of how we end them. But it doesn't mean the equation has to be what you're talking about or what I'm talking about or what Dame is talking about. So I think that's the challenge to us as a community, is to not be separated by how we talk about things and our angle on the issue. Everybody cares. I don't think I don't know anyone. I talk to a lot of community members who wants people in tents on the sidewalk. So, if we start there, so yes, I think all of that, but I don't think that it'll address the root causes of why so many people are out in the streets.
Break down the silos. That's the bottom line, is that, politically we have the city, we have the county, we have the state, just by way of example. What I'm trying to do, what I think we're all trying to do, is break that apart and say, let's focus together. Once we start to do that, then it's a community problem. I'm a lawyer. But particularly as a lawyer, I don't think law gets to solve this. I don't think the courts can solve it. I think once you start to be moving in the right direction, for example, religious organizations are going to be key to helping solve homelessness. I really do think so. But I think the topic sentence to all of this is breaking down silos.
Well, Jenny, Damon, John, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about this. And I feel like we'll be doing it again in the not too distant future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.